Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy Segment Show. Also today in this segment, I'm at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota. The Black Hills Central Railroad is located on 222 Railroad Avenue in Hill City, South Dakota, and takes visitors through the Black Hills between Keystone and Hill City for many years to come. In 1874, the discovery of gold opened the Black Hills to mining, and Hill City was the first settled by miners in 1876. The city almost turned into a ghost town when miners moved to the northern Black Hills after discovery of gold there, but in 1883, tin was found near the town. Then mining grew and the city became known for its wild living. Once it was referred to as a town with a church on each end and a mile held in between. Addy Camp was settled by the miners of the nearby Addy Mine, which was ran under the England-based Harney Peak Tin Mining, Milling, and Manufacturing Company. In 1892, the Grand Island and Wyoming Central Railroad, which is a subsidiary of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, built a line running from the town just east of Hill City. The mine was never successful despite shaft and draft mining down to 800 feet. In 1900, the railroad extended to Keystone, which caused the town to grow again. In 1917, the railroad leading into the town was removed, which turned Addy Camp into a small farming community, and some tungsten mining resumed during World War I and World War II. Mount Rushmore also has heads carved into the mountain, and the four heads we see on the mountain are four different former presidents of the United States, from left to right, which is George Washington, the country's first president, Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president of the USA, Theodore Roosevelt, who was the 26th president, and Abraham Lincoln, who was the 16th president of the United States. Construction of the monument began in 1927 and it took 14 years to complete. Also, visitors from all over the world even get to see the monument year-round. Also, the monument is in a national park and is located just 3 miles from the railroad's Keystone Depot. The line was first constructed in 1890 and was originally owned by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. 10 miles of standard gauge line was built to take advantage of the gold mine boom in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The Keystone branch of the railroad's High Line from Edgemont, South Dakota, north through Hill City to Deadwood, reached Keystone, South Dakota on the 20th of January, 1900. After years of declining use in the late 1940s, William B. Heckman, a steam enthusiast, and Robert Freer, a sales engineer at Electromotive Division, began to organize what would become the Black Hills Central Railroad. In 1957, veteran Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy engineer Earl Coppens took the first two-car train out of Hill City, South Dakota. The route gained its nickname, the 1880 train, because Heckman thought it must be what it was like to ride a train in the 1880s, although hardly an accurate description of either the line or the equipment. The name has been stuck and the Black Hills Central Railroad was born. The railroad was dual gauge, which had narrow gauge and standard gauge trains run from Hill City to Oblivion, South Dakota. Also, the Y track with the narrow gauge track still remain at the location, but the Y track is no longer active because the third rail that followed the standard gauge route from there to Hill City were removed in 1964. In 1970, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Great Northern, Northern Pacific, and Spokane, Portland, and Seattle railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern Railroad, and the line was used by the Burlington Northern Railroad. The railroad continued to acquire the current range of locomotives and rolling stock and continued operations over the full length of the Keystone Branch until the 1972 Black Hills flood destroyed the last 3 miles of track into Keystone. The Burlington Northern Railroad then relocated and rebuilt about 2 miles to a new Keystone Junction about a mile west of the town in Keystone, South Dakota. The trains continuously operated on the line, hauling tourists up and down the line. Then in 1981, the trackage was acquired from the Burlington Northern Railroad and freight services were withdrawn from the Keystone branch. The last mile was continued into Keystone in 2001. In 1986, the Burlington Northern abandoned the Deadwood branch through Hill City, leaving the Black Hills Central isolated, and it became the George S. Mickelson Trail, which is a long-distance rail trail. The South Dakota State Railroad Museum is located at the Hill City Station. Today, the train continues taking visitors between Hill City and Keystone, South Dakota for many years to come. What you see right behind me is Black Hills Central Railroad 1. Black Hills Central Railroad 1 was built by the Whitcomb Locomotive Works in Rochelle, Illinois in 1941 and is the 60,086th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an 80-ton center cab type diesel locomotive. Originally, this locomotive was built for the Stone and Webster Company and was originally numbered 60,086. Then it was sold to the United States Army and was originally numbered 7379, and it served the Department of Defense and operated in Washington State during World War II. Then it was bought by the Black Hills Power and Light coal-fired generating plant just near Lead, South Dakota, and was renumbered 1. Then in 1983, it was acquired by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was given the number 1. Today, it is preserved at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and is primarily used for switching duties as well. What you see right behind me is Minneapolis and St. Louis 1208. Minneapolis and St. Louis 1208 was built in 1947 and is a bay window caboose. This caboose saw service for many years on the Minneapolis and St. Louis Railroad and was used on the back end of freight trains as the train crew's office. Then it was retired in 1971 and was nearly cut up for scrap and was rescued by Jeannie Botter and her husband Herman. They had it in their backyard for years and maintained it carefully. It was even used for family and community gatherings as well as a museum of sorts for the community of Huron, South Dakota. Then Jeannie wanted to find the caboose a new home and couldn't keep up with it. Then she reached out to the South Dakota State Railroad Museum's curator about making arrangements to move it to the site. In 2016, it was moved to the location and was carefully restored till 2017. It was then moved inside the building. Today, it can be found on display inside the South Dakota State Railroad Museum building at the Black Hills Central Railroad in near the Hill City Depot in Hill City, South Dakota as well. And also you can even visit the interior of the car as well. What you see right behind me is Prescott Northwestern 7. Prescott Northwestern 7 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1919 and is the 51771st steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 262 Prairie type steam locomotive. Also, the locomotive is named General Custer. This locomotive was originally built for the Ozanne-Graysonia Lumber Company in Prescott, Arkansas, and was originally numbered 2 and was named George Teat. It spent many years hauling timber products during its career. Later, it was sold to the Caddo and Choctaw Railroad in Rossboro, Arkansas, and was renumbered 7. Then in 1938 it was sold to the Prescott and Northwestern Railroad and it kept the number. Then it was sold to the Higgins Shipbuilding Company, New Orleans, Louisiana. Then it was retired. Then in 1961 it was bought by Elliott Donnelly and was leased to the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota. In 1975 the Black Hills Central Railroad took ownership of the locomotive after Elliott's death. Over the years, the Black Hills Central gave it several different modifications and liveries on it. It was also featured in the 1970 Walt Disney TV series Gunsmoke in one episode. It was then featured in the 1971 Walt Disney movie Scandalous John. Then it appeared in the Steven Spielberg's TV series Into the West in 2005. It operated hauling the excursion trains on the railroad for many years. Then in 2012 it was put into retirement and was soon put on display in this spot. In 2023 it was moved into the shops for a repaint and took about a month to complete. Then it was moved back outside for display. Also, Prescott and Northwestern 7 is the only surviving steam locomotive that served the Ozanne-Graysonia Lumber Company and the only surviving steam locomotive that served the Prescott and Northwestern Railroad and is one of 2 surviving Caddo and Choctaw steam engines left in the world today. And 11 is the other one and is on display at Rinneby Park in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And 7 can be found here on display at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, where it is today. What you see right behind me is United States Army 553. United States Army 553 was built by Pullman somewhere in the 1900s and is a hospital car. Originally, the car was built as a parlor drawing room. It was built for the Pullman Company with a name given to it by Pullman but is unknown. This car was used on passenger trains for many years. Then it was sold to the United States Army and was numbered 553 and was rebuilt into a hospital car where it would transport injured troops during the wars. Then it was retired and it was then acquired by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and was put on display at the depot in Hill City, South Dakota, and is used as a concession stand as well. What you see right behind me is United States Army 552. United States Army 552 was built by Pullman somewhere in the 1900s and is a hospital car. Originally, the car was built as a parlor drawing room. It was built for the Pullman Company with a name given to it by Pullman but is unknown. This car was used on passenger trains for many years. Then it was sold to the United States Army and was numbered 552 and was rebuilt into a hospital car where it would transport injured troops during the wars. Then it was retired and it was then acquired by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and was put on display at the depot in Hill City, South Dakota, and also it is used as a concession stand as well. What you see right behind me is Northern Pacific 1639. Northern Pacific 1639 was probably built by the Northern Pacific Brainerd Shops in Brainerd, Minnesota, probably in 1906, and is a wooden caboose. This car was used on the back of freight trains for many years and was used as the train crew's office as well. Then when the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Spokane, Portland, and Seattle Great Northern and Northern Pacific Railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern in 1970, it was then used by that railroad and was renumbered 10866. Then it was retired and was then acquired by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, where it is on display today and is used as a museum as well. What you see right behind me is Peninsula Terminal 104. Peninsula Terminal 104 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1926 and is the 59137th steam locomotive built by that factory. Is a 262 tank engine prairie type steam locomotive. Originally, the locomotive was built for the Silver Falls Timber Company in Silverton, Oregon, and it has always had this number. It spent many years hauling timber as well. Then in 1938, it was sold to Alaska Junk Company in Portland, Oregon, and hauled cargo with scrap metal as well. Then in the 1940s, it was sold to the Peninsula Terminal Company in North Portland, Oregon, and hauled and sorted freight cars as well. Then in 1965 it was retired and was then bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota. It was also restored to operating condition and started pulling the excursion train over the railroad as well. Today it is preserved here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, where it can be seen today. What you see right behind me is Weyerhaueser 108. Weyerhauser 108 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1926 and is the 59,087th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 2662 Mallet type steam locomotive. Originally, it was built for the Potlatch Lumber Company in Boville, Idaho, and was originally numbered 24, and originally burnt coal. For several years, this locomotive was used to haul timber products during its revenue career. Then it was later moved to Elk River, Idaho. Then in 1934, it was bought by the Weyerhauser Company in Longview, Washington, and it was converted to burn oil. In 1959, the company was just renamed the Weyerhauser Company. Then it was retired, and in 1964, it was donated to the Northwest Railway Museum in Snoqualmie, Washington, and sat in the boneyard. Then in 2016, the locomotive was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota. It was then moved and was prepared to be loaded onto a semi-truck to be transferred to Hill City and soon joined the roster with its sister 110 on the railroad, and also restoration soon began after arrival. Then in 2020 the restoration was complete, and when it was repainted it was given the matching livery to match its sister 110 as well. And after restoration was done, it even did a double head run with 110, and the two locomotives sometimes do double head runs as well. It soon started running under its own power on the railroad. Today it is preserved here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, where it is seen today, and sometimes it pulls the train between Hill City and Keystone as well. What you see right behind me is Black Hills Central Railroad 63. Black Hills Central Railroad 63 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1956 and is the 225/61st diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a GP9 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was originally built for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad and was originally numbered 6178. It spent many years hauling freight trains on the railroads it served as well. Then in 1964, it was then sold to the Indiana and Ohio Railroad and it was renumbered 63. Then in 1999, it was sold to the Chillicothe, Brunswick Rail Authority and kept the number. Then in 2005, it was retired and was sold to Progressive Rail Inc. Then in 2006, it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, where it is today. It was repainted in this livery and kept the number. Also, it sometimes operates on the railroad and hauls the excursion train between Hill City and Keystone, South Dakota, only if needed as well. What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 10800. Chicago and Northwestern 10800 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1909 and is a drover's caboose. It is believed to have been in the number series of 1516 to 2181. This caboose was used on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad for many years and was used as the train crew's office and was used on the back end of freight trains as well. In 1937, it had been rebuilt and the cupolas were removed, and the double sash windows had already been replaced with standard design in a 1923 rebuilding. The car body completely resided and a steel underframe was applied. It was repainted in a boxcar red oxide paint and renumbered in the 10800 series, but with the only even numbers. In 1941, Chicago Northwestern adopted a new paint scheme for its caboose fleet, which was bright vermilion red. The drovers eventually received this color one by one. They were also converted to AB type air brakes as required by the Interstate Commerce Commission, and this car was converted in 1952 in Norfolk, Nebraska. Then it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was given the name Hillio and was put into service on the railroad. Also, Chicago and Northwestern 10800 is one of two surviving Chicago Northwestern drover cabooses left in the world today, and 10802 is the other one and is on display at the Mid-Continent Railway Museum in North Freedom, Wisconsin. And 10800 is preserved at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it sometimes operates on the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is the Black Hills Central Railroad Bluebird. The Black Hills Central Railroad Bluebird was built by the Black Hills Central Railroad Shops in Hill City, South Dakota, and is a passenger car. Also, the flat car underneath the car is a flat car that was owned by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, used as a foundation for the car body. Then the coach body was built right on top of the car when it was constructed in the shops. Also, it was given the name Bluebird. Today, it is preserved here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it hauls visitors on board over the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is the Black Hills Central Railroad Rochford. The Black Hills Central Railroad Rochford was built somewhere in the 1900s and is a passenger coach. The car was built from a boxcar originally. The original number that this car had may be unknown as well. It is believed to have originally been built for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. It was soon put into maintenance of way use and was rebuilt as a bunk car. Then it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was soon reconstructed as a passenger coach. Also, it was given the name as well. Today, it is preserved here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it hauls visitors on board over the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is Oregon Electric 65. Oregon Electric 65 was built by American Car Company in Canton, Ohio in 1912 and is a passenger car. Also, the car is named Edward Gillette. Originally, this car was built as a combine interurban car with a baggage compartment. It first worked the Oregon Electric Railroad in Portland, Oregon, and this is the original number. It's been many years hauling passengers on board as well. Then, in 1934, it was sold to the Skagit River Railway in New Salem, Washington, and was renumbered 16. Then it was retired, and in 1955, it was acquired by the Willamette Valley Electric Railway Association in Glenwood, Oregon, and it was given back the original number. Then in 1966, it was sold to the Vernonia South Park and Sunset Steam Railway Association. In 1970, it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was given the name. Also, the unit had its motor removed and was rebuilt as an ordinary passenger car. It sat in the boneyard for quite some time and was carefully restored. Today, it is seen here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it hauls visitors on board over the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is Oregon Electric 112. Oregon Electric 112 was built by American Car Company in Canton, Ohio in 1912 and is a passenger car. Also, the car is named Orville. Originally, this car was built as an interurban car. It first worked the Oregon Electric Railroad in Portland, Oregon, and this is the original number. It's been many years hauling passengers on board as well. Then, in 1934, it was sold to the Pacific Great Eastern Railroad and was renumbered 603. Then it was retired, and probably in 1964 it was acquired by the Vernonia South Park and Sunset Steam Railway Association. Then in 1970 it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was given the name. Also, it became unpowered and was rebuilt as an ordinary passenger car. Today, it is seen here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it hauls visitors on board over the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is Oregon Electric 125. Oregon Electric 125 was built by American Car Company in Canton, Ohio in 1913 and is a passenger car. Also, the car is named Keystone. Originally, this car was built as an interurban car. It first worked the Oregon Electric Railroad in Portland, Oregon, and this is the original number. It's been many years hauling passengers on board as well. Then in 1934, it was sold to the Pacific Great Eastern Railroad and was renumbered 605. Then, probably in 1964, it was retired and was acquired by the Vernonia South Park and Sunset Steam Railway Association. Then, in 1970, it was bought by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it was given the name. Also, it had its motor removed as it was being rebuilt to being an ordinary passenger car. Today, it is seen here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it hauls visitors on board over the railroad as well. What you see right behind me is Weyerhaueser 110. Weyerhaueser 110 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1928 and is the 605 61st steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 2662 Mallet type steam locomotive. Originally, it was built for the Weyerhaueser Timber Company in Longview, Washington. It's been many years hauling timber as well. In 1954, it was sold to the Rayonier Inc. in Railroad Camp, Washington, and it kept the number. Then it was retired, and in 1968, it was sold to the Promontory chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. Then, in 1971, it was transferred to the Wasatch Railroad Museum and was placed on display in Heber City, Utah. In 1993, it was then sold to the Nevada Southern Railway Museum in Boulder City, Nevada, where it was placed in storage. Then, in 1999, it was purchased by the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota. In 2001, it was soon back in operation and started operating on the railroad, pulling the excursion train up and down the hill. In 2016, it reunited with its sister 108, which joined the fleet that time, and in the year 2020, the sister started matching this locomotive, and sometimes they do double head runs on the railroad with each other as well. Today, it is preserved here at the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City, South Dakota, and it sometimes operates on the railroad pulling the excursion train as well. Well, I hope you all enjoyed learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show. Also, I hope to see you all again in the next segment. And if you didn't subscribe to my channel yet, the subscribe button is just down below the video screen. And if you didn't give the Facebook page a like yet, here's where you'll want to go. And if you didn't give the Instagram page a follow yet, here's where you'll want to go as well. Also, be sure to get your merch at teesprings.com. I'll have the link in the description box below, along with the Facebook and Instagram pages. And remember to subscribe to the Train Guy. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show. Signing out until next time. All aboard!